All stories are based around a premise, a core idea or concept that serves as the foundation of the story. For many stories, the premise is fairly straightforward, serving as nothing more than a springboard to launch us into an exploration of character. Boy meets girl, two friends go on a road trip, a stranger arrives in town, etc. But what about those story premises that are not so straightforward? Those unique what-if concepts that make us sit up and say, oh, that's an interesting idea. These tales are known as premise-driven stories. These stories sell themselves to audiences with their central idea rather than their characters, themes, or style. So today we'll be breaking down two premise-driven stories, the 1998 film The Truman Show and the 2010s TV series Person of Interest, to answer one fundamental question: what makes for a perfect story premise? Spoiler warning for both The Truman Show and Person of Interest. In breaking down the premises for both of these properties, we'll be looking at these key elements: base idea, the catch, necessary odd coupling, premise-based antagonist, and premise-based theme. So why are we comparing these two vastly different plots? Well, in addition to being premise-driven stories, both The Truman Show and Person of Interest explore the dangers of playing God and perpetual surveillance. Also, by examining both a standalone movie and a multi-season TV show, we can see the difference in crafting a single story premise and a premise that must produce numerous stories. The base idea is the initial spark of a story concept, the what-if that serves as the genesis of a story premise. For The Truman Show, that base idea comes through the question, what if someone's entire life was a TV show? Right off the bat, we can see how this base idea places us in the realm of premise-driven story. This isn't a concept that can be allowed to play out in the background, while the plot revolves around characters drinking coffee and musing about life, love, and politics. Base ideas of premise-driven stories demand center stage, and The Truman Show is no exception. But a base idea isn't enough. For an idea to become a story, we need conflict. We need a catch. So how would we take our base idea of someone living in a TV show and flesh it out into a full premise? What sources of potential conflict immediately present themselves? Well, since we have a character whose whole life is being filmed for entertainment, what if they didn't know it was happening? Now we have a complete premise, something that could be pitched to a publisher or film executive with a single compelling sentence. A man believes he's living a normal life, unaware he's actually the star of a reality TV show. The catch reveals the difference between a great idea and a great story premise. The idea of a reality show revolving around one man being filmed 24/7 is intriguing, but it's incomplete. It's Truman's lack of awareness of his reality that completes the premise. In stories like this, premise drives everything, so it's critical that the core details are airtight. The central conflict, the catch, must be high stakes and formidable. Once Truman starts pursuing the truth, his whole reality turns against him. It's literally him against the world, at least the world as he knows it. The true test of a story's premise comes as we begin adding all the other pieces: character, theme, world building, etc. If the premise has been constructed properly, these elements should derive seamlessly and naturally from the premise. If our story premise is weak or incomplete, these elements will feel tacked on and disjointed. An interesting result of Truman Show's unique premise comes when we look at odd coupling. Odd coupling is a writing technique in which characters of different and conflicting personalities are forced to work and coexist with one another. The clashing of personalities forces the characters to grow and traverse along their various arcs. We'll get a more traditional look at this later with Person of Interest. In The Truman Show, we get a brilliant inverse of this technique. Typically with odd coupling, we see how characters who initially can't stand each other ultimately come to realize that their differing traits make them perfect for each other. But Truman's world is one that has been constructed artificially. Thus, the people handpicked as perfect for Truman, whether they're his parents, best friend, or wife, end up being bad fits for him for the simple reason that, unlike Truman, they're not real. Fittingly enough, the one person Truman truly connects with is Lauren, a background extra. The unique construction of Truman's world makes for an equally unique odd coupling, the most famous man in the world and a character only meant to exist in the background. Speaking of characters, a well-written premise will also demand a certain form of antagonist. Take for example another premise-driven story, The Hunger Games. Suppose you didn't know anything about the story, but were presented with the premise. In a dystopian future, teens are forced to fight to the death in a giant arena. Based on this information alone, it's simple to deduce where the sources of antagonism are likely to originate: our protagonist's competitors and the creators of this cruel game. We can approach Truman Show's premise in the same way. If our story hinges around a man desperate to learn the truth about his artificial world, wouldn't the most likely source of antagonism be the creator of said artificial world? You see how a well-constructed premise drives story elements? The very nature of Truman Show's premise all but demands the existence of the character Christoph. As Truman struggles to escape his artificial world and enter reality, Christoph is the God-complex TV producer determined to make his reality show star play by the rules. The greatest test of a story's premise comes down to one word: theme. If the premise has been correctly constructed, there should be at least one starkly apparent theme presenting itself, and the Truman Show is no exception. It's right in the name of the protagonist. What does it mean to be a true man? What does it mean to be real in an artificial world? We can see this theme encapsulated in Truman Show's epic finale, as Truman is preparing to step out the door. As stated earlier, in a premise-driven story, premise drives everything. We cannot be given a premise as unique as The Truman Show's and not expect a deep exploration into what it means to be a real person.
In case I don't see ya, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
So we've looked at how to structure premise to drive a standalone story. But what happens when that premise needs to expand to tell numerous stories, both standalone and overarching stories that take whole television seasons to tell to completion? The TV series Person of Interest is formed around one compelling idea. What if the government had a massive surveillance system which monitored humanity in order to prevent acts of terror? Let's think back to our Truman Show example. As soon as the base idea was set in place, we needed a follow-up question to flesh out our idea into a full premise. That question was, what if Truman didn't know his life was a TV show? Here's where things get interesting when breaking down Person of Interest. What we have right now is more than enough to formulate a premise. We have the key components of our base idea, and the one missing element, conflict, is all but offered up on a silver platter. The surveillance system, or rather the machine as it's called in the show, is designed to prevent acts of terror. We could easily construct a show about government agents using the machine to stop these acts, with the conflict being a never-ending stream of villains of the week. But in crafting a premise, it's important to know the story you want to tell. And for series creator Jonathan Nolan, brother of famous director Christopher Nolan, the story he wanted to tell involved taking the premise one step further. As explained in the show, the machine uses its unfettered surveillance to detect premeditated acts of violence. But not all of these would represent national threats, resulting in a division in what the machine reports: threats relevant to national security and non-relevant threats. Nolan chose to center his show around the non-relevant threats, those premeditated crimes which would affect the lives of innocent ordinary people but might never make the evening news. So now instead of a government agency show, we have a premise in the making that focuses on individuals. But notice its premise in the making. We're still missing that all-important element, the but. We're missing the catch. There's a unique story problem built into the concept of a surveillance system that can warn a person in advance about an upcoming crime. If our protagonists possess an all-seeing machine, where is the conflict? If the machine detects crimes being planned in advance, all it has to do is let its users know the who, what, when, and where, and our protagonist can step in and stop it. No fuss, no muss. And, unfortunately, no story. So now we can see what our catch needs to be. Having been presented with an all-seeing machine, we need to find a plausible, story-specific way to put constraints on it. The exciting part about solving story problems is that our solutions often end up becoming the most intriguing parts of our story structure. Person of Interest is a perfect example. How to solve the problem of a computer system too powerful to enable story conflict. Solution: although the machine sees everything, it limits the information it shares with its users. What makes this solution brilliant is its plausibility. As explained in the show, Harold Finch, creator of the machine, recognizes the danger of turning over such a powerful tool to the government and puts a restriction in place that quickly becomes the core focus of the show. The machine only communicates by providing the social security number of a person about to be involved in a crime. The vagueness of this information is what provides the all-important catch that completes the premise statement of our show. A powerful supercomputer lets its users know when a violent crime is about to happen, but only communicates by providing social security numbers, preventing our protagonists from knowing whether those involved are victims or perpetrators. For many successful premise-driven stories, the magic doesn't center around the base idea, it centers around the catch. Person of Interest's brilliant catch bakes a unique element of suspense into every episode. We, along with the central characters, never know at any given moment who the good guys and bad guys are. A premise like this is absolutely made for television, as our expectations are twisted, misdirected, and outright upended time and again as we struggle to figure out if this week's number is a potential victim or perpetrator. As mentioned earlier, the odd coupling used in Person of Interest is the more traditional type, but it's both brilliant and directly driven by the premise. The fact that we have the machine in our premise means we already have as a character the creator of said machine, Harold Finch. But here's where our premise begins to expand and demand the existence of more characters. As creator of the machine, Harold is made aware of people who are about to be in danger. But knowing about it and being able to do something about it are two completely different things.
Doing something with that knowledge? That's where you'd come in.
This is where our expertly crafted premise gives us a perfect odd coupling. Harold, a bookish loner, is forced to partner with someone utterly unlike himself, someone highly trained in combat and espionage, able to carry out the missions ahead. Enter John Reese. The pairing of John and Harold is so utterly effective because it's inextricably tied to the premise. To prevent crimes using a supercomputer, you need someone who knows computers and someone capable of stopping crimes. Two entirely different skill sets, which would almost definitely belong to two very different people with two very different personalities. Characters need to be different from one another in order to challenge and refine each other, but their pairing must make sense within the logic of the story. Person of Interest's unique premise provides this perfectly. Creating an effective TV show premise presents many unique challenges, but chief among them is the need to work over the long term and on an episode-by-episode basis. However, a well-constructed premise can do both. We can see this in Person of Interest when considering antagonists. For individual episodes, this isn't difficult. The very nature of the premise indicates that every episode there will be a crime, so we can expect our forces of antagonism to derive from the perpetrators of said crime. Where things get a little more complex is when we take the holistic view of story. Where could we expect the long-term sources of antagonism to derive? Well, we've been saying it all video. In stories like this, premise drives everything. Our premise provides us with a good supercomputer, so what happens if there's a bad supercomputer? This is what we encounter with the introduction of Samaritan, the dark version of the machine. As the series progresses, Samaritan and its operatives become the long-term antagonists of our story, antagonists derived directly from the premise. As is often the case for multi-season TV shows, the themes at play in Person of Interest are varied and layered, but they all have one thing in common. They trace their roots directly back to the premise. Freedom versus safety, good of the individual versus good of the masses, the danger of playing God through technology, all of these derive from the very core of the premise. Just like the Truman Show prompts questions about what it is to be a real person, the concept of an all-seeing surveillance system prompts questions like, should such a system exist? Are actions taken in the name of public safety worth the sacrifice of individual privacy? Is the old saying true? Does absolute power corrupt absolutely? Questions like these aren't something that are thrown in to pad a series runtime. They are the natural product of a well-thought-out premise that illuminates real-life issues in a unique and compelling way. So I hope this helps. Comment below with what movie or TV show you believe has the most brilliant premise, and subscribe for more writing tips.